What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, retired two-division world champion, superstar boxer turned colorful boxing pundit and analyst for ESPN and Top Rank Boxing, Timothy Desert Storm Bradley. He kind of does a about face. I don't want to say about face, but, his tune is kind of changing when it comes to the most highly anticipated, undisputed welterweight world champion showdown between undefeated, newly crowned, unified three-belt WBC, WBA, IBF, Ring Magazine welterweight world champion superstar boxer, who is widely considered by many to be top two best pound-for-pound fighters in the world, if not number one best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, in Errol the Truth Spence Jr. Errol Spence Jr. is 28 wins, no losses, no draw, 22 big wins by way of knockout, 32 years of age, 5'9.5" with a 72-inch arm reach. He makes up for 50% of the biggest fight in the sport of boxing. He and undefeated, his biggest rival, three-division world champion, former junior welterweight undisputed world champion, currently the reigning WBO welterweight world champion, who is widely considered by many to be the number one best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, in Terence "Bud" Crawford. Terence Crawford is 38 wins, no losses, no draw, 29 big wins by way of knockout, 34 years of age, 5'8", with a 74-inch arm reach, okay? Well, Errol Spence and Terence Crawford, it makes for the biggest fight in the sport of boxing. Now, we know Timothy Bradley and Terence Crawford, they have a close relationship, right? And initially, Timothy Bradley, he stated that he thought that Terence Crawford was going to knock out Errol Spence Jr., right? He always thought that it was a big fight. He always respected Errol Spence, but he thought that Terence Crawford was going to knock out Errol Spence, and he thought that, Errol Spence was initially avoiding Terence Crawford. Well, now Timothy Bradley does an interview most recently, and Timothy Bradley, he states that Errol Spence is more skilled and fundamentally sound than Terence Crawford, right? And he said that why he still gives Terence Crawford the edge to beat Errol Spence, to edge it out. But the reason he does it now is because of Terence Crawford's legs. He stated that after watching and witnessing Errol Spence's latest performance against former WBA welterweight world champion Cuban star boxer Yordenis Ugas, right? In which Errol Spence, he broke Yordenis Ugas' ribs, he broke Yordenis Ugas' nose, and he broke Yordenis Ugas' right orbital bone, okay? Errol Spence has found a newfound commitment to the sport of boxing after suffering a horrific car accident back in October of 2019 after unifying the titles against two-time welterweight world champion superstar boxer Showtime Shawn Porter, in which he picked up the WBC strap, but just 12 days later, he suffered that horrific car accident October 10th, 2019. And Errol Spence, he stated that he's found a newfound commitment and love for the sport of boxing, and understanding that, what the sport of boxing provides for him and his family, and he's allowed to feed his family, and so on and such, right? And so with that said, Errol Spence, he seems better. Now you have guys like legends, retired Hall of Fame, iconic superstar boxers. Roy Jones Jr. Stated that he still believes that there could be some lingering effects from suffering the car wreck, and he don't know if he's going to be his true self going into the fight with Terence Crawford, and he believes Terence Crawford could get a 6-round stoppage, right? We know James Toney, another Hall of Fame legend, icon, superstar in the sport of boxing, he said that Errol Spence would be lucky to get to the 6th round. So with that said, Errol Spence has seemed to have gotten better. We know his commitment. He was once his own nutritionist. Errol Spence was, he had a strength and conditioning coach, Blue Ray Fitness, but it seems like he parted ways. He don't seem like he parted ways with Blue Ray Fitness. He hadn't been using them, but now Errol Spence, he hired a nutritionist. He's hired a chef. He's hired a strength and conditioning team. He's committed. He's back in the ring after the Yordenis Ugas fight, April 16th. He was back in the ring. Just 2 days later, he was back in the gym, back in the ring, and looking like he's sparring and preparing for this fight with Terence Crawford. So his mindset seems to be a lot different than it was in the past. And so Timothy Bradley, maybe that's the reason why Timothy Bradley is viewing this fight differently, okay? Timothy Bradley, he's looking at Errol Spence and he's saying, listen, Errol Spence is more skilled. He's more fundamentally sound. He says, but the reason he gives Terence Crawford the edge is because Terence Crawford has power in both hands. Okay, Terence Crawford, is definitely skilled, has a high ring IQ, but he says Terence Crawford has quicker legs. He has better footwork than Errol Spence. So he feels like that's going to be the difference that separates Errol Spence and Terence Crawford in this fight. And so with that said, he still stated that he believes that Errol Spence can easily win the fight, right? He said Errol Spence could easily win this fight still, right? He says that it's a 50-50 fight. Both guys can win the fight. Both guys are capable of winning the fight. And he could see a case in a scenario in which Errol Spence wins this fight, right? Many people in the build-up for this fight was saying that Errol Spence was avoiding the fight, pricing himself out when he asked for 60-40 split. When Errol Spence said he's doing the bigger numbers, and people got upset. They said he's pricing himself out. He's avoiding Terence Crawford, not looking to make the fight happen. And since Errol Spence, he said that he suffered some setbacks, which we know he suffered the car accident, and then Errol Spence, he suffered that broken or detached retina. That when he was heading into his highly anticipated showdown with legendary 8-division world champion, iconic Filipino superstar boxer Manny Pac-Man Pacquiao, and he suffered a broken or detached retina, and he had to be pulled from the fight. And so from that point on, he was out the ring again for another year. Now, he was out the ring for 14 months going into after the Sean Porter fight. Then he fought Danny Garcia, 2-division world champion Puerto Rican superstar boxer, and he dominated Danny Garcia. But again, he was scheduled. Then we had the global pandemic, so he's out the ring because of that. Then he was scheduled to face Manny Pacquiao. Then he suffered the eye injury. So it's a lot of setbacks. So Errol Spence, he stated that he had a lot of setbacks that prevented this Terence Crawford fight from happening sooner. But immediately following his fight with Yordenis Ugas, April 16th of 2022 in Arlington, Texas, AT&T Dallas Cowboys Stadium, Errol Spence, he's been pursuing Terence Crawford aggressively. Okay, he's been letting the world know this is a fight that he wants. He's been pursuing it aggressively. Okay, he even had T-shirts made up of him knocking on Kell Brook's door for the IBF title in 2017, and he was knocking on the door of Sean Porter in 2019, and he called himself, he refers to himself as the big fish, right? So he had the big fish in the form of the Grim Reaper knocking on the doors, collecting all these belts. And the last door, the third door, had obviously Yordenis Ugas, and the last door had it was closed and it had TC on it, Terence Crawford, and he was knocking on the door saying he's gonna pick up that strap from Terence Bud Crawford, right? And so with that said, Timothy Bradley was asked, about the aggression of Errol Spence pursuing Terence Crawford fight, but still being quiet while doing it. And are people taking his, his quietness for a weakness, for a sign that, he's not, hungry for this fight? And Timothy Bradley said, absolutely not. And Timothy Bradley, he also stated that Errol Spence is the ultimate dog, right? He said, he said Terence Crawford is a dog in the ring, don't get me wrong. He said Terence Crawford is definitely a dog in the ring. But then he said that, Errol Spence is the ultimate dog. He said, we saw Errol Spence thrown from a car at 100 miles an hour, get up, not suffer too many injuries, nothing really wrong with him, and fight a guy in Danny Garcia in 14 months, not being 100% of himself and dominating Danny Garcia. This is something I said, right? So, when people question, does Errol Spence have dog in him? Well, obviously he has dog in him, So with that said, this is a huge fight. It's the biggest fight in the sport of boxing. I'm shocked that you had legends like Roy Jones, Antonio Tarver, and and James Toney speaking of the fight in the manner in which they speaking of it, as if Errol Spence has a puncher's chance to win the fight, right? When we saw that Terence Crawford, he gets hit a lot. We got to look at it from this standpoint, right? You take this into consideration. None of these guys, Tarver, Roy Jones, or James Toney, give Errol Spence credit for beating 4-division world champion Mexican superstar boxer Mikey Garcia, right? They don't give him full credit for beating Mikey Garcia. They say Mikey Garcia was too small. Well, it's ironic because Terence Crawford and Mikey Garcia started a weight class apart from each other. You know, Terence Crawford started his career at 130. Mikey Garcia started his career at 126. Right? So he's at least he's a champion at 126, 130, 135, and 140. Right? I think Mikey may have started at 122, but he's a champion at 126, 130, 135, and 140. So he's only a weight class behind Terence Crawford. They both fought in smaller weight classes, but yet Errol Spence beating Mikey Garcia gets no credit. It's similar to when Floyd Mayweather dominated Juan Manuel Marquez. Okay, everybody stated that Juan Manuel Marquez was just too small for Floyd Mayweather, but yet Manny Pacquiao, who's smaller than Juan Manuel Marquez, wasn't too small for Floyd Mayweather, and that was the biggest fight in all of boxing. It turned out to be the biggest fight, lucrative, revenue-wise and record-wise in the history of the sport of boxing. But when Floyd Mayweather dominated Juan Manuel Marquez, you know, Marquez was too small, but he's 5'6" with a 68-inch arm reach, and Manny Pacquiao's 5'5" with a 67-inch arm reach. Right? Their approach to the sport of boxing is different. Juan Manuel Marquez is more of a technician. He's a counterpuncher. He's a thinker. He's a pure boxer. Manny Pacquiao is an athlete. He's explosive. He's a southpaw. He got power in his left hand. Very fast feet, very fast hands. That's the only difference. Marquez is actually bigger than Manny Pacquiao. So it's similar situation where you have people not giving Errol Spence credit for beating Mikey Garcia, but yet you look at Terence Crawford. Yeah, he's taller and more rangy than Mikey Garcia. He has a wiry frame, but they started out in similar weight classes. But he'll get credit for fighting and beating Terence Crawford. I can't wait for this fight. Timothy Bradley says Errol Spence, and it's ironic because you have guys like Antonio Tarver saying that Errol Spence is one-dimensional, right? You have, Bomac, Brian McIntyre, Terence Crawford's trainer and manager. He stated that Errol Spence is one-dimensional. Timothy Bradley doesn't believe that. He believed that Errol Spence is more skilled and fundamentally sound. So I can't wait to see how this unfolds and plays out. But let's see how everything works. Hopefully October, we get the fight that we're looking for. But that's all I got for y'all. Make sure you hit the like button. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue, Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. You haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell icon to get all the new notification. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shout out to the entire LDBC. Shout out to New Media. Shout out to Black Media Row. Make sure you like and share these videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.